ask you about another fighter who was supposed to fight, like we said back last week in Riyadh. He was supposed to fight in the main event.
Yeah.
By the way, Robert Whitaker came out and
What a stud.
absolutely looked fantastic. He looked like there's a reason he is that number one, number two guy in that weight division. At the top of the food chain in that weight division in the UFC. There's no doubt about it.
He looked good. He looked a lot better than he has in his past 3 fights. He came in, he looked in shape, he looked ready. I think not, he fights a lot at home. So not
Well,
having the pressure of fighting at home too probably helped, right?
Ikram Alaskarov is no slouch, but he's very
No.
young to the game, and he exposed himself with some very fundamental mistakes that he made. And he realized very quickly that at that level, if you want to get to that level, you can't make those mistakes. And he's going to learn from that. He's a very, very, very talented fighter who's going to learn from that. But Whitaker showed that there's a reason for this. And he was supposed to fight Khamzat Chimaev.
Yeah.
And those of you who've been following along with the board game at home, you know that Khamzat Chimaev is a very, very big favorite of ours around here at the Law Live Audio Wrestling, available on all of your podcast providers and on YouTube. And we go out of our way for talking about how good Khamzat really is. But here's the question that I have to ask you now, Brady, because this seems to be an occurrence ever since how long ago was COVID? COVID was a couple of years now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he's been struggling for a bit.
And he got sick, and he got really sick back then and had to pull out of some fights. And it seems like, he had a couple of fights in between. He fought, our boy, right?
Kevin Holland. Yeah, he fought Kevin Holland.
You know what I mean? And
he was supposed to fight Nate, but I don't think that fight was ever really booked.
Never. That's a different story. You can go back and listen to us
Wayans brothers. That. Yeah, and the Wayans brothers. Just search it on.
Yeah, we put on our tinfoil hats and talk about that whole debacle that was. But anyways, Khamzat was supposed to fight on this card, and Khamzat got sick again to the point where he got hospitalized. And I'm of two minds on this, Brady, and I don't know about you, but I mean, there's being tough, and then there's being tough to stay out of the hospital kind of tough.
Yeah, there's two types of human beings. There's one that cuts their finger off and just tapes it and goes back to work. Then there's another one that goes to the hospital and gets sick and
gets more sick and exposes themselves to, because the hospital's full of sick people, bro.
Well, yeah, right? I don't know if it's just that. I honestly think he got one of those really bad bouts of COVID, and I think that because he is naturally an athlete and he has such a good immune system and a lot of good people around him and nutrition, and he has knowledge, or has people that have knowledge of how to keep the body as healthy and as at peak performance as possible, is probably the only reason he didn't die from it. Because look at it, still taking a hell of a toll on his body. From the rashes to the staph infections to lung issues, everything. It's been bad.
Are you one of those guys that's suffering from that, what do they call it, that long-term COVID, basically, where it just fucks with his immune system so much? Because I find it hard to believe that he hasn't had enough blood work to find out whether or not he has cancer or something, lupus or some kind of like bigger disease that is going on now. You know what I mean?
Something's going on. So there's definitely something going on. If his organs, it sounds like he was in the hospital for something shutting down. So what that is, I don't know.
It's my first question for you then, Brady. Does Khamzat Chimaev ever fight again?
I hope so, but I see Conor fighting before I see Khamzat fighting.
If that's the case and Khamzat doesn't fight again, does Khamzat Chimaev at that point move to the top of the list for fighters that should have been a champion but never made it to that level?
I think he would go to the top of the list of the biggest what if of all time.
The top of the list. Who else would you have on that list, do you think?
There's not many people. Evan Tanner. I think Evan Tanner could have came back and had a really good end of his career.
Well, I mean, yeah, if he was pointed in the right direction, he could have probably come back. But He wasn't.
Nick Diaz. I know that's not even a joke. Let's not get into the whole Nick Diaz shit. But I think if Nick Diaz had, for some reason, had figured out how to stay in the UFC for around the time that the Ultimate Fighter was built and stuff like that, I think Nick Diaz, that would have been somebody that very well could have taken.
All fucking seriousness. You know what the biggest problem with the Diaz brothers and fighting in the UFC has been? All seriousness.
What's the biggest one? Because there's a few of them.
Rounds. And this is what I'm saying, because if it's a fight to the death, if it's Pride rules where it's, longer rounds or something like that, that's the Diaz brothers wheelhouse.
Well, and then speaking of what ifs, Fedor, that was my last one. That was my biggest what if. And I don't mean I know that we got to see Fedor in his prime, but we got to see Fedor in a lot of freak fights as well.
Hot take?
Yeah. I know I got an idea of where you're taking this one.
Overrated.
That's what
I think that Fedor is good, very good, but I also think that Fedor was fed fighters the same way that boxers are fed fighters to pad that record.
I think there's some of that. There was some of that.
To create the myth, to create the monster of all of that. But we saw Fedor get knocked out by Dan Henderson.
Yeah, well, we've seen, yeah. We've seen it by Verdun too, right? Or no, choked him out.
2 weight classes below Fedor.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that.
Well, right? That was the end of the guy's career. I'm not going to sit here and defend Fedor. You just asked me what the biggest what ifs are, in my opinion, and I think that would be
mad. You're mad. You're mad. Conor ain't fighting. You're mad. Hamzat's not fighting.
I am mad at my 2 favorite fighters in the company are not fighting, and they both pulled out within a month.
Who's your number 3, Brady?
Why do I even have to say it?
Say it.
It's Nick Diaz.
Pimblett? Oh.
Paddy Pimblett. Good night, Paddy. Bob is gonna fuck you up. All right, before we go into our pro wrestling segment.
Oh, I got a quick question for you. Speaking of Paddy Pimblett.
Yeah.
Is Jared Gordon going on the job squad?
I fucking hope so. I messaged you this weekend and I was like, actually, I called you on the phone and I said, hey, what are you doing? You're like, well, I'm busy. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Jared Gordon's getting another payday. You're like, what? That was literally your answer. What?
He won that fight.
I know.
I know. Wow. And argument would say he won that Paddy Pimblett fight.
Quick theory on Yuri versus Poton.
Yuri theory.
Yuri's taking the belt back. We're getting a trilogy set up.
Because of some grapple festing?
Nope.
Do you think Yuri's going to come out and do a little bit of grappling?
He's going to sleep him first round.
Wow.
First round, sleep him. Mark my words. Don't put a bet on it and fucking blame it on me. Don't put a bet on it and blame it on me, whether you win or you lose. Do not bet on it. Unless you're using $1 or something. But I'm telling you, Yuri, round 1.
As a work?
Nope.
Would you ever do that in the UFC? Would you ever just let somebody cold cock you and knock you out in the first round?
Yeah. If you're leading me, if that person's Conor and you're giving me a trilogy, fuck yeah, knock me out, bitch.
Interesting.
Sleep me. He'd sleep me anyway. You think I didn't have a chance against anybody that has a fucking contract in the UFC? The girl probably carrying the cards around the ring is in better shape than I am right now, man. I've fallen apart.
Be sure to click that subscribe button, click that like button, and tell all of your friends. Share it with everybody. We appreciate you just as much as you appreciate us. So let's make this thing even bigger.